Welcome to this video kickoff of a new series, one of those new series with instructional content here on the channel. This series is about middle games, middle game strategy, middle game planning. How do you improve your middle game abilities? There is mostly one way to study games. Look at games, typical ideas that have been played before, and just try to incorporate them in your own games. Very often those things are done subconsciously. You have seen some idea, not really actively registered in your brain, but still you somehow remember it, and then in a game you are able to do something identical or very similar. It's really about looking at games where sort of in a model way this kind of planning and strategical ideas were presented, and step by step you gain more knowledge and ideas in the structures that you know. It's often helpful to look at structures, pawn structures that come up in your games. So it's a bit difficult for me to select structures that might appear in your specific case. So it's pretty much that I try to look at all kinds of structures. The planning very much depends on the pawn structure, of course. This is the key to strategic chess. Adjust the pieces and plans according to the pawn structure. Let's start with this example. It's game from 1963. Boris Spassky playing Yuri Averbakh. Spassky, of course, later become world champion 1969, but he was one of the strongest players at the time already. Averbakh, a very strong grandmaster at the time, and he's nowadays is the oldest living grandmaster, being older, a bit older than 90, I believe. Let's start this game. We have a Ruy Lopez, and it really starts around move 20, where we look at it more deeply. But I just want to show how it appeared, this position. So we have the absolute main line of the Ruy. Averbakh plays the Chigorin variation. Many possible lines. I play queen c7 here, but he went knight d7. Also a move seen to this day, the so-called Keres variation, knight bd2, and now he took here. Nowadays it is mostly played in that fashion, leading to a more confrontational game. This kind of structure is happening often. Okay, takes and takes on d4. This is not a decision to be taken lightly, the double capture in the Ruy Lopez. This general pawn structure is appearing quite often. It's very often the case that piece activity compensates for the worst structure. However, in this specific case, I think the piece activity that black has is not sufficient. I think this line is not very promising for black. But okay, we're not looking at the opening, but how it is unfolding afterwards. Averbakh played bishop to f6. Spassky traded here, and now went bishop g5. He wants to get rid of this bishop on f6 that always keeps the d4 pawn protected. Averbakh now played queen to d8, and Spassky now traded on f6. So the really instructional part of this game is starting around here. It is clear that white will get the d pawn back, the d4 pawn back, and at the end black will still be settled with this somewhat weak d6 pawn. This is the main point of this position, or the main feature of this position, that this pawn might be weak. One problem here is that black has some pieces traded already, so any possible counterplay that he has, especially against e4, is less effective. First point is, how should white take? At first you think, okay, well, maybe just take with the queen to get more pieces traded. In the end game, the pawn weakness should be felt. The problem is, however, tactically, this is not a good move because knight e5 is strong. That's very important to notice. Now white has a big problem. There's the threat of knight takes f3 with check, losing the queen. And white really has no good answer to this. Something like this is really not great. At the end, h3 falls. So you must play a very ugly looking move like knight d2 or even trade. And after that, black has no problems whatsoever. Note that the d6 pawn is now shifted to e5. And here he has no weak pawn anymore. In fact, here it is totally equal. Maybe bishop b3 and we trade even more. Queen d4 is a big mistake. Shouldn't be played. So Spassky went knight takes. Knight e5 was now played. Yeah, centralizing this knight. It looks very like a very logical move. Black also could have tried knight c5. This comes into consideration, trying to make a little bit more pressure on e4. White probably should just play a simple strengthening move like rook c1. He went to e5, however, keeping also this idea in mind. And in fact, this is something that white should attend to. The knight to c4 would be an annoying piece. So he went bishop b3, which is a good move anyway, as the bishop is simply better on b3 on this diagonal than on c2. So we see that white is improving the pieces slowly. Bishop d7 was now played. Yeah, this is a slight sign that black is that something is not quite in order here for black. You really wanted to play bishop b7, but he certainly was afraid of a possible knight f5 idea. Here, in fact, bishop takes e4 is possible, tactically speaking. But in general, this is certainly the objection that Averbakh had to this move, that sometimes there is a knight f5 coming. Also, a4 is an interesting move here, trying to provoke more weaknesses here. This is a move that bishop d7 was working against. Okay, bishop d7. And here we come to the first interesting situation. Spassky now played the move rook to c1, which looks like, let's say, the instant move, the move you want to play when you look at the position at first. It might be that the move queen d2 was even a bit more precise. The idea is that after queen d2, rook c8, you want to go rook a d1, yeah, using this rook on the d file. We see that this setup probably saves white a tempo and makes the defense a little bit more difficult for black. We see why. Rook c1 is played, rook a c8, queen d2. Everything's looking very normal. And here black commits, I think, a slight mistake. He plays now knight to g6. Yeah, his idea is possibly to activate the knight here. But this move is, he lets a little chance, a little opportunity slip. Black definitely should try to, lessen the pressure a bit by trading. He should trade here and play rook c8, trying to exchange all rooks. When all rooks are traded, the whole situation becomes far less problematic for black, as rooks are the pieces that are mostly putting pressure on those kind of pawns. Yeah, the bishop on b3 is not a problem in regards to the pawn on d6. It's on a light square. And the knight can also not attack it easily. So you want to trade rooks in this position. And here at least one pair of rooks could have been traded. White probably should continue with rook d1, keeping at least one pair on the board. This is what black should have done. He, however, played, as mentioned, he played the move knight g6. And now it's a very instructive situation. Here Spassky realized that putting the rook on c1 was maybe an obvious move, but not really helping much. He went rook c to d1, keeping as many pieces on the board as possible. This very often is a good strategy. If you have pressure on the opponent's position and he has difficulty in organizing his forces, very often it's a good idea not to exchange too much. Of course, all of those rules, they need to apply to concrete positions. And sometimes if you can trade something and you win immediately, you should do it. But very often it's a good idea to look at moves that keep the pressure and not trade too much. Yeah, here Black, I think, went for a plan that is not very successful, but the defense is not easy. Maybe he should have played a move like rook d8 or rook e8. He went knight e5 back. This looks strange, but there is something has changed in the position, and this is the rook is off the c file. Black's idea is to get in the knight to c4. This was the plan. White, however, does not mind that very much. He continues with the very active and aggressive move f4. Attacks the knight. And now, yeah, where should it go? Knight c4 was the plan and was played in the game. Still, we need to look what else is there. Yeah, Black also could go to g6 or c6 after knight g6. We probably just drop back to e2. Yeah, keeping f4 protected and now attacking this pawn right up front. It is a very nice position. Black can play bishop c6, but then we have a very nice a choice. You can take d6 or we can take f5 first. Both leads to a good position for white. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, and if Black now tries to grab, we use this unlucky situation on the e file. Knight g6 is not helping very much, and knight c6 is answered by knight f3, or you can take. Yeah, I think it's both good. You can also take. Yeah, the problem is that if you look at rook takes, there's e5. Yeah, white is just better centralized, and here it's yeah, you can take d6 or you can play e5. e5 is also very strong. Oh, I'm sorry, this was a mouse slip. Oops, this is of course the one I wanted to play. And here white has a fantastic position. The e pawn is very, very strong, intending queen here, and yeah, Black is in big trouble. He went to c4, which was the idea after all. Okay, white cannot tolerate this knight. He just took it. And now, yeah, this is now an interesting moment. Black took with the pawn, I think, but hard to tell. I think I still prefer rook takes, but it's not a great position as well. Black is just suffering here on the d file with the pawn and this unlucky position of the bishop. We can look at rook takes. It looks a bit better from a structural point of view than pawn takes, but it has a concrete problem, of course. The problem is that after b3, rook c7, yeah, to keep this protected, there is knight f3. We threaten to just grab the pawn, and after a move like rook c6, we play e5 and still win the pawn. So the pressure is just too much on the d6 pawn. But maybe Black, yeah, I don't know. Maybe he still should have done that. I mean, the position after b takes is also not very attractive, but has absolutely very little counterplay. Yeah, hard to tell. Rook takes is also very very ugly. There's not even a good way to just, maybe, is there some way? Let me look at this. I didn't look at this so much beforehand. Maybe there is a way to jettison the pawn and somehow fight. Yeah, just give up the pawn for for nothing but activate pieces. It looks hard to do. White is totally dominating after the capture. Maybe a move like d5, hoping for this. But white will take with the pawn and play knight to e5. Yeah, it's not a nice choice. B takes was played. And here we come to the next very instructive position of this game. What white now needs to do in this position, he needs to find a good setup for his pieces. It's not about calculating a super deep line here or be very precise with an attack. What you need to do is you need to figure out where the pieces really belong in this position. And Spassky plays it in a very nice and instructive manner. He finds the absolute best setup now. Knight to e2. This is the first very important move. It shows that the knight, while looking nice on d4, is also presenting a problem for white. With the knight on d4, the pressure on the d file is blocked. The pawn on d6 is the weakness, and we have two pieces looking at it, queen and rook. But with the knight on d4, yeah, well, you're never going to take the pawn. It's just blocked by the knight. And with knight e2, he is repositioning this knight to a very good square. And this is to c3. From c3, the knight has a multi-purpose role. It looks at d5, very nice square. It protects e4, which can be a weakness after black plays bishop c6, rook e8, moves like that. And the knight is also on a very safe square on c3. This is very important. Knights absolutely love to be on squares where they are protected. The pawn on b2 always reliably protects the knight, so this is sort of a dream position for this piece. Averbakh plays bishop a4. Yeah, trying to at least gain a little bit of time by pushing the rook to c1. Rook d8, knight c3, and back to c6. Of course, he must cover the d5 square. You cannot allow knight d5. Yeah, and now we see the next step. Rook d1, back, and h6. Yeah, black basically needs to sit and wait. He's really suffering from a bad pawn structure. White has two pawn islands, very typical thing. One pawn island and the second pawn island. Those connected pawns you call pawn islands. And if you want to determine who has the better pawn structure, the one who has got fewer pawn islands is usually the side with the better structure. And here we see that black, in comparison, look at this, one pawn island, 2 and 3. Black has at least 3, and you could argue that he maybe has 4, as the d pawn on d6 and the pawn on c4 are not protecting each other. They are not really a good pawn island. Yeah, but however, how are we going to continue? What is the best setup here? Yeah, Spassky finds the best setup. He plays queen to e3. What is the point of this move? By the way, queen f2 was also good. What's the point of this move? You want to double on the d file, of course. Yeah, increase the pressure on the d file. Rook b8, rook e2. Very important. One rook will be on the second rank to cover the weakness on b2, and the other rook will help to pressurize the pawn. This is the ideal setup. One rook on d2, always keeping an eye on this pawn. Well, there is no counterplay now, but you rather have it protected. It's better. This rook is on d4, the best possible square. It attacks c4, it attacks d6, it covers e4. This is an ideal setup for white. And from here, we can start to figure out how to further increase the pressure. Black played queen e7 now. He really does not have any active possibility. He can never move his d-pawn or change the pawn structure in any way. The question is, however, how do we continue? We have a big pressure on d6 and really would like to win the pawn, but how are we going to manage this? Yeah, at the moment we attack it twice, it's twice defended. But this is not a situation of a standstill. White can still improve the situation for him. However, how to do that? Yeah, if we look at this, the rooks attack d6. What we want is we want an additional attacker, and this attacker is probably going to be the queen. It's hard to imagine how the knight would be able to attack the pawn. Yeah, and the knight is very well positioned on c3. It does a good job there. How do we use the queen to attack the pawn? Yeah, here there are basically two possibilities, as queens can move on diagonals and and on files and ranks. It must be either on the d file or on some diagonal like this or this. Yeah, there is simply no other possibility to attack the pawn. It's a bit difficult to imagine the queen coming to a3. Yeah, this looks difficult to achieve. And if we go to a3, we also in a way weaken the king side a bit. f4 is a slightly weak pawn. Note that in this specific situation, white would pretty much prefer to have the f pawn on f3. This would even be a better pawn structure than having the pawn on f4, as e4 then would be very securely protected, and the whole situation would even be more stable. Okay, but let's not lose the thread. To a3 is difficult, so where else? We can go maybe to g3. g3, move the f pawn, attack it on d6. This is an idea. The next idea would be on the d file, so we could set up something like this. Queen e1, d1 or e2, d1. This typical configuration on the d file, tripling with the queen behind the rooks. This is a very well-known motif called Alekhine's gun or Alochin's gun. He had this in a famous game against Nimzowitsch, San Remo, 1935, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around that time. And this was also an idea here. But again, the queen on d1 is a little bit neglecting the protection of the king side. So Spassky went for the queen g3 idea. Here we go. It's all very logical when you think of it. You want another attacker, and the queen is the attacker. Queen g3, king f8. Black really can only sit and wait. f5, and here it is. d6 now is impossible to hold. He tried this. Yeah, if we look at this, this was a way to protect it for the moment. But after e5, black is collapsing. Yeah, using the pin here, the pawn cannot move. Yeah, he went rook e8, and white now just took the pawn. Yeah, with a still overwhelming position. White has all the activity, has not given up any sort of he's not made any concession for this pawn grab. Yeah, here black played queen to e5. He could have considered to take on e4 here, but after this move and rook e2, white has a fantastic attack. Will be very difficult. I mean, also this is a very, very bad pin, so not something that black can save. He played queen e5, after which white now just traded and went rook d4. Yeah, all pieces are actively placed. The rook is on d6, possibly shifting over here, or on the 7th, and the rook on d4 is doing two things, protecting and attacking at the same time. This is the way it should be. You shouldn't have pieces that are only defending in an ideal state of your position. a5, yeah, not very helpful. a5 is also weak here, but it's very hard to give black any advice here. White is now keeping all his positive sides in the position and activates as much as possible. Rook to a6, and now getting the king also in the game. Yeah, the king should help. White has time. The king now is an additional protecting piece, and it might also be helpful with further pushes on the king side. Note that our advantage from a structure point of view is on the queen side, but we can also gain on the king side, gain space. This will happen later. Rook c5, rook d7, why not? The 7th rank is nice to have. And king to d4. Yeah, he just keeps all the activity. Note that this here, it was possible, but not the most precise way to play. Something like this is to be avoided. It loses control of the position. White still is in good shape, but why allow black any counterplay against the king? We should just keep the structure as it is and continue to improve the position. King d4, bishop e8. Here there was a possibility to take a4, a little bit more attractive than before, but still, why take? We have perfect control and all our pieces are more active. It's just a very important principle that we don't want to exchange an excellent piece on c3 against a terrible piece on e8. Even if we see that it probably wins, it should be not taken lightly. Somewhere around here, black has, he's still struggling here, and we have traded for a very weak pawn. I mean, the pawn on a4 is terminally weak anyway. We have traded our fantastic knight against this ugly bishop. This is not a good idea. Just keep all the advantages intact, and here he's trying to double on the 7th. This is just much stronger. Yeah, g4, gain space, and now double on the 7th. Perfect control. Black cannot do anything here. Went rook c6 and knight d5. Yeah, now we even get to occupy this square. Rook d8 and g5. Everything should be activated as much as possible. Rook to d6. Yeah, how do we finish this off here? The key point will be certainly the 7th rank and those pawns. But here, we without any problems can also snatch the pawn. Black now has no counterplay. The bishop on e8 is tied to the f7 pawn. And this means that this knight will stay dominant in the center.
Check.
A check was given and rook c2. King e5, rook c4. Black really cannot do much. Yeah, now white is calculating a forced win. We, as white here, have many good moves, certainly. I mean, something like, let's say, something like this is just keeping everything in good order and will win. But here white has a direct win, and Spassky, of course, wanted to win as quickly as possible. He played g6. This is the strongest way to finish things off. If black takes, rook g7 will be decisive. The idea is rook h7 to h8. Yeah, nothing that black can do. He went f6.
Check.
This is the relatively best move. But now white can decide matters by the piece sacrifice. Knight takes f6.
Check.
G takes, king takes. And here, this is just too much. The combination of those pawns and the rooks on the 7th rank will absolutely kill black. He gave this check.
Check.
King g5. And here, black resigned right after move 40. Move 56, I'm sorry. I have a different count here in my notes. He resigned now. Yeah, white is now winning on the 7th rank. Yeah, what should black play? Let's just briefly look how it would have went. Yeah, let's say a move like this. Yeah, then the easiest way to do it is to play rook a8, intending rook f7 and rook takes e8 and over. You can give a check here and try to hang on. But at the end, there's also the g pawn that will prove to be decisive. This is a very nice example for strategic planning and finding a good setup. Let's look at key points. One key point here was that white avoided the rook trade. Yeah, keeping as many rooks and many pieces on the board as possible, especially those that can attack the weakness. Very important was this situation. Here white needed to find a good setup for the knight and his rooks, and he found the absolute best one. The knight to c3, and now this. This is the best possible configuration. It keeps everything under control, and it shows that the knight wants to be on a protected square. This is really the best square that the knight can have here. It's really better to be on there than on d2, as the knight on d4 would block the pressure on the d6 pawn. Yeah, the knight on c3 also reliably protects e4, so that there's no counterplay against this pawn. These are the kind of examples that one should look at, and I will present more and more of them in this series in order to improve middle game ideas and get to the right mindset how to approach those positions. It's very difficult there to think in terms of schemes and setups, and not so much in terms of concrete moves and variations. Here it was essential for Spassky to determine that this queen g3 to d6, for example, was a good way to continue. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this first part of the series. Going to present much more of those instructive examples. Yeah, make sure to stay tuned when they come. Thanks for watching.